Hello, welcome to the Naftiko Capabilities Podcast. My name is Ken Lane. I'm the Chief Community Officer for Naftiko, but you might also know me as the API Evangelist, where I've been covering the technology, business, and politics of APIs for the last 15 years. This is my new podcast where I talk with different folks about interesting API and integration related issues. But this round, we're going to be steering things more towards business outcomes, and hence the name Capabilities. This podcast episode, I've sat down with David Boyne of Event Catalog. David worked for me for a brief time back at Postman, and then he's been working really hard on his open source and commercial offering called Event Catalog. What captures my attention about Event Catalog beyond it just being focused on event driven is how he's using his approach to help enterprises see these events, these signals that exist across the enterprise, and then organize them by domain and start mapping and making sense of the enterprise, which is something I'm really interested in when it comes to what we're building at Naftiko, because of that business alignment that organizing your events by domain can bring. So I sat down with David just to get the basics on what is Event Catalog.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the event catalog is just a documentation tool to bring discoverability to architecture. And that's kind of it, really. You know, most people out there, they build distributed systems. It ends in chaos because no one's documenting anything. We have open API and things like that and async API, but there's still a lot of mess. And event catalog really just helps people save time and put some controls around the chaos. You know, that's the whole idea anyway.
I'm a big fan of putting controls around the chaos and helping us make sense of things. And I really believe that tuning into events can help us do that. But I wanted to understand more about the role that event-driven architecture plays in discoverability and the visibility of our infrastructure. So I asked David what his thoughts were.
It's an interesting one, yeah. So it used to be like, discoverability for your event-driven architectures. So like 3 years ago, the project just started off as a side project for just cataloging events. That was it. Hence event catalog, right? And since then, it's kind of just grown arms and legs and like into a lot of domain-driven design, a lot into like domain, subdomains, bounded context, and these kind of things. And really, when you take the primitives away from all of this stuff, it's just like Lego blocks. So now I just say discoverability for architecture. So because most people are building REST architectures, stream-based architectures, message-based architectures, all sorts of things. And modern architectures have, as you know, various different elements of all of this. So why not just bring discoverability to it all? So that's kind of where it's at the moment, really. But the main focus still is event architectures because a lot of people in that area are just struggling with chaos, especially at a scale. You know, at day one, having 5 or 10 events is fine, or 3 services. And day 100, when you have 1,000 events and 50 services, it's just chaos. And everyone's just like, what the hell is going on? You know, everyone I speak to literally is just like, we're in a mess and we need help.
Hearing the same thing. Everyone's in the same boat. We're all kind of drowning in this and trying to make sense of things, and we're all moving really fast. So I asked him, does event-driven architecture and event catalog give us the ability to map things in real time? Because we're moving so fast and things are changing around us. We need tools to help us do that in this moment.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, people don't know what they don't know, and they don't know how to find this information. You know, especially in enterprises, it's like the information's there. It's just if we can make it visible, and I'm a very visual person, so if we can make this visual in like visualizations and graphics and things like that, I think it just helps tell a story. And the interesting thing is not really, I always thought it was a developer's problem to solve, but the more I'm into this space, it's not at all. You know, it's a product and a business, and there's very different personas coming to Event Catalog to help with various different levels of complexity. Yeah. So it's a big problem, really.
It's definitely very complex. And how I'm seeing enterprises address a lot of this is start thinking of things into domains. So you see a lot of this with domain-driven design and other approaches. But I asked David, what's the role of event-driven architecture in helping us be able to do this in real time and be able to organize things into lines of business domains, things that make more sense to business leadership?
Yeah, the studio one's an interesting one. I kind of took a lot of inspiration from like event storming and modeling and the DDD side of things. I always found it a bit weird that you would model something and then on post-it notes and then have no artifact at the end of it. So originally it started with like, once if we could model something and have an event catalog at the end of it as a baseline, as some documentation, as something that we can go on. So that's kind of like the original thing, but it's still fairly new, to be honest. And the more I think about it now, the more the position around it all really is just to, my thoughts are, if you document your architecture and you add the meanings and everything like this, it's like, why can't I use my architecture primitives, like my REST endpoints or my messages or my schemas, and actually use them to design stuff for now or in the future, or document workflows or business processes? Why does everything have to be so independent of each other? Why do I have to go to a Miro board and use post-it notes when I already have the essence of the architecture somewhere? So why don't we use the documentation to drive that? And that's kind of, I think, the thing I'm exploring at the moment, and the innovation I want to look at is like, can we bring it back around again from design documentation back to design again, and collaborate and feedback and this kind of stuff. So it's still fairly new. Some people are using it and, using it to document business workflows, which is really cool. So I'm just curious, to see how we can just make that ecosystem better, because I think it's a bit of a disconnect for sure.
Agreed. I think there's definitely a disconnect, and I think part of what causes this disconnect is we approach things from the strategic, but we also need tools to help us at the tactical level and back again. So I asked David, what's the role of Event Catalog when it comes helping us equip us at the tactical, on the ground level, trying to make sense of what's going on in our day to day?
I think so, yeah. Many people are using it for different types of things, really, and different kind of workflows and processes in the organization. So some people are mapping their whole domains, and then kind of going granular, lower level. There's a lot of like kind of overlapping ways of like the C4 model, which is like the different levels of information, the containers and all this kind of stuff. That's somewhere I think Event Catalog will eventually kind of go. It naturally is there anyway, which is domains, services, in the services, the messages, the schemas. And like product owners don't care about schemas, but they care about the domains. They care about the opportunity. They care about what we have and what we miss, and this kind of stuff. So it's an interesting thing, and I have no idea, to be honest, and I try and speak to the users of Event Catalog and the open source community and just let them kind of steer the ship, and just kind of trying to steer it in the right direction, and these people are using it. So
folks are definitely looking for that ability to steer the enterprise ship in the right direction, which isn't an easy thing to do. And the part of this problem is you start turning that ship, and by the time that ship starts turning and heading in the direction you need, things have changed. And things have disappeared, and new things have emerged. There's kind of an ephemerality to this. So how can Event Catalog and event-driven architecture help us with API discovery when it's becoming more ephemeral and ever-changing?
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I likewise. Yeah, it's I stumbled across like DDD, a few years ago, really, and as I was in event-driven architecture, just deep into it, there's just this huge synergy, and I kind of unlocked in my head. I was like, everything makes a lot of sense, especially like using events to communicate between boundaries and this stuff. And like when you bring in elements of DDD and then that community into technical community of EDA and that community, and bring these ideas together without focusing on the implementation details, there is a lot of things to explore and value to be captured. And So it's just an interesting time. Most documentation tools, to be honest, out there, like, as you know, like focus on API documentations, like take an open API file and do some cool stuff, which is fine. But questions I always have is like the business context and like, why does this thing exist? Why does this model exist? Who owns this? Like, what is the business process to this? How do you get from A to Z? Like all these questions that cannot be captured, unless I'm mistaken, in an open API file. So the idea really is just why can't we take these things that we have and just add the meaning on top? So then when we look from a business point of view, we can answer these questions, not just a technical point of view all the time. So, yeah.
That's what this podcast is all about. That's what I'm building at Naftiko, is trying to understand the technical as well as the business details of all of this. And how do you understand that across large enterprises, which isn't easy. And as David showcases, we can use event catalog and events to kind of understand this and map this out and understand the richness of the services, the tooling, the resources, the data, all the things we have. But if we do this mapping, I wanted to get his opinion on, is it going to be enough to provide what we need for this AI moment, the AI integration and the agents that we're building to automate across this landscape?
Yeah, I think so. I started to think a lot about this recently, and I've built like AI stuff in there. It's an interesting one when you drop AI in conversations with enterprises. Is like you either get people not interested at all, right? So it's like don't even bring up the word, or you get people that are like super into it, and I that kind of fascinated me. But with the AI stuff, the way I see it at the moment is like, if you documented your boundaries and your language and your ubiquitous language and your services and how they connect, and you visualize them, and you have that core foundation at the bottom, like surely you can use that as a foundation for context for other things. Like, and I experiment with things like asking questions of like, hey, I want to build this new feature. Like what APIs or what events, what messages do we have? Who owns them? And what are the schemas? And it's just like, it does a very good job at kind of finding this information.
Mm-hmm.
But then even away from chat is like, can you take, I was chatting to someone the other day, like take an event storming model, for example, a picture of one, and just chuck it into event catalog and let it auto document based on this stuff. So I think there's like loads of different elements. But I feel like the core foundational, this is the organization, not from a technical point of view, there's elements of that, sure. But here is the organization from a domain point of view, from a language, from a modeling, from like, what is it? What's your core domain, supporting, generic, whatever. And let the AI just consume that context to answer the questions it can try to answer. So I think so personally, but I need to kind of experiment and explore more in that area for sure.
It's definitely where everyone I'm talking to is at. We're all trying to figure this out. Most of the enterprises I'm talking to are looking for ways we can equip them and help them explore and experiment more in a safe way. And I'm really interested in how David has kind of enabled that using event catalog, because it's built as event driven and documentation because it's very visual, but it's that ability to organize things into domains, services, and understand these events and schemas that are being emitted from our enterprises, because that's that richness, that's that context that AI is going to need, that the humans need, not just the AI. So it's interesting. Definitely recommend checking out Event Catalog, eventcatalog.dev on the web. David's easy to find on LinkedIn. He's very active in sharing his story. It's one of the things I really love about what he's building. Definitely recommend you head over there and check it out. All right, that concludes today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. We got more coming next week. I think we'll go back to the more topic-based. I got some interesting topics around specs and standards that I think we're going to work on. And so stay tuned, and we'll be back next Tuesday. Apologize for being a day late on this one. The week kind of slipped by. Lots of things going on, lots of work happening. But here we are Friday morning, and we have the episode. So I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Oh, hey, one last bit. I want to talk about Naftiko signals. It is our approach to understanding the signals and the events coming out of enterprise organizations, but from the outside in. Using David's tool, Event Catalog, you can do that from the inside. But what we're doing with Naftiko's signals is trying to understand what enterprises are up to from the outside in. And then once we start having conversations with enterprises, we validate some of those signals, and then what we recommend when it comes to trying to find the meaningful signals within the noise. So if you're interested, get involved. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to understand what you're trying to accomplish, what your priorities are when it comes to APIs or AI. And you can reach me at kinlane@naftiko.io. And like David, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active and very vocal on LinkedIn. You can find me there, as well as Blue Sky. We're pretty easy to find, and I look forward to talking to you. Thanks for tuning in.